Hey everybody, my name is Alex with Hake Hardware, and this is part 2 to the Ultimate Autonomous Guide. So in this one, we are going over setting up Docker and Portainer. I have a Substack article that goes over pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about. It, I'm still editing it here because I need to actually take some photos of like the steps because I am doing my setup live. So I will be actually installing Docker and Portainer live in this video, and then I'm going to take some of the screenshots from the video to add to the articles. So typically I write the articles first. That makes it easier for me to create the videos because I can use this as kind of a template. I did all this kind of from memory and from the official docs here, so there might be a few things that I'll have to change up as I go through if I mess something up or forgot something. But this video will jump right into getting Docker installed. So if you remember, I have three computers. I've got Bender, which is the computer that I'm basically recording this video on. Then I have Terminator, which is where I'm going to be putting all of my SSDs, and it's Threadripper. It's got lots of power. It's got a 4090. And then we have Johnny 5, which is sort of my always on mini PC where I host a lot of like low resource requirement things. How we're going to do it is Docker needs to be installed on every computer. Now, Bender is not going to be used for Autonomous, but I use Docker for a lot of things. So I'm going to have Docker installed on Bender. I'm going to have Docker installed on Terminator because we're going to be using Docker to deploy containers on Terminator for our farm. And then Johnny 5 will do Docker, and we're going to do a full Portainer installation. Now on these other two, they're just Portainer agents. So you only need one full Portainer installation, and that's typically you're going to want it to be on something that's always going to be on. Because if, let's say, I turn off Johnny 5, if I try to go to Portainer, I won't have access to it because it's turned off. So even though these are running Portainer agents, they connect to this full instance of Portainer, and I can manage them from Johnny 5's full Portainer instance. Now it's actually a website, so what I'm doing is Johnny 5 will be hosting a website for Portainer, and I can do everything through the website. So we'll go over that, and I'll show you kind of exactly how it looks because we're going to be adding Terminator and Bender as environments inside our full Portainer instance on Johnny 5. But just keep in mind, like you're going to want to pick the computer that's always going to be on for Portainer, because if you turn it off, you don't have access to Portainer. Now the Docker images, so like when we deploy like our farms and stuff and all that, the Docker images that you set up in Portainer will still be running if you turn off Johnny 5. So this is just the management section. So, and you could even just log into Terminator and manage your Docker containers locally the same way you would with Portainer, but Portainer is like a graphical user interface. It makes it really easy to create Docker Compose files and just manage all of your computers at once instead of having to SSH into each of these and manage Docker independently. So that's it'll probably become more clear once you use it a little bit, and also once we go through the installation, kind of like how it all operates. So the first thing we're going to want to do is install Docker. Now, it's pretty straightforward. I always put the official docs, a link to that, because over time they may change. So if these commands aren't working or you just want to go to the official docs here, let's see, bring it up. All I did was, if you scroll down a little bit, to install using the apt repository, each of these commands I've just copied out and put it in just like a formatted thing. So that way, and it kind of explains, what each command is doing. And then finally, we'll do the install. So all you would do if you want to follow the official docs is, I don't typically paste all this at once. I'll do these commands one at a time. And then once you have pasted all of these commands, you'll come down here and to install latest version, run this. So just if you want to go from the official docs, you can do that. but again, like I said, I broke them down here. So let's jump into Terminator. I've actually installed Docker already in, let's get this a little bit larger. Johnny 5, and then this local terminal here, this is actually Bender, so you can see Bender, and then Johnny 5. I already have Docker installed, so you can see I can run Docker PS, and it'll show, it's kind of like the same as running LS, where I'm listing all my containers. There's no containers running. Terminator, though, if I were to do Docker PS, Docker hasn't been installed yet. And there are some other ways you can install Docker, like you can do it with Snap or apt, but I prefer to do it kind of the manual way. That's just my preference, and I kind of suggest you do the same. So we always start out by updating our repositories. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we will install the CA certificates and curl, which I already have installed. You may not. Next, we're going to create the keyring directory with the appropriate permissions. Then we're going to download the GPG key for Docker and put it in that folder we just created. We're going to set the appropriate permissions so that it's readable by all users. Then we're going to add the repository. And then we're just going to update our repositories so we get the latest version of Docker. And then the next command is actually going to be installing Docker. So it's a pretty big file, 437 megabytes. By default, Y is selected, so you can just hit enter here and it'll go and install Docker. So it's actually really easy to install Docker. Sometimes it can feel intimidating with something like Docker because it seems advanced, but it's really, especially when we get into Portainer, it's so easy. So if we clear that out, you need to run sudo docker ps, and you can see now we have Docker installed. We don't have any containers installed, but we do have Docker installed. So let's jump back. I think I can do this. Perfect. The next thing we're going to want to do is install Portainer. So what we've done right now is we've installed Docker. And as you can see, actually, let's jump back in. There is like a Docker CLI. So when we install Portainer, we're actually going to be using the Docker CLI because I don't know if I mentioned it, but Portainer is literally a Docker container. So we're going to be installing Portainer as a container in Docker. And we're going to use the Docker CLI to do that. Now, why we're installing Portainer is because Portainer kind of abstracts the CLI and makes it a graphical user interface. So instead of having to manually type in, all the information for a container or creating Docker Compose files and launching those, we can actually just log into a website that we host locally. So this is all hosted locally on Docker, and modify and access all of our Docker containers on all of our computers on the network that we connect to it. So yeah, that what we're going to be doing next is installing Portainer, and that is going to use the Docker CLI to do that. So again, I have the official docs. If we go to those, you can see it's pretty straightforward. The first thing we're going to do is create a volume, and a volume is just like a folder that the container has access to store data. So because it's a website and you're going to be like adding things and removing things, it has to store the state of that website inside a container, inside a volume. And then we're going to actually we're going to download, install, and then run the Portainer server container. So you can think of this, I've been calling it like a full Portainer instance, but it's like a Portainer server. And then all the other computers are just going to run the clients or the agents, and those are going to connect to your server. So, and this is actually just using the Docker CLI. So you can see we're doing docker run -d -p 8000. So we got some ports we're setting up here. We're calling it Portainer. This is how you could manage all of your Docker stuff, but we're going to use the GUI because I think it's a little bit easier. So let's jump back into Terminator here, and I'm not going to be installing Portainer server, the full instance of that, on Terminator. Terminator is going to be an agent. We want Johnny 5 is what we're going to be doing for our full Portainer server. So I have to update the commands a little bit from what they show because I don't add the Docker group to my user because it's too privileged. You can do that, and there's a all right, sorry, just for full, disclosure, if you go to the post install, Linux post install to allow non-privileged users to run Docker commands, you can run the sudo usermod ag docker user. That's adding or appending the group Docker to the current user, so the user you're logged into. That allows you to run commands like this without sudo. Now, Docker has access to a lot of highly privileged things, and just for security reasons, I don't like to add the default user to that. So what we're going to do instead is just add sudo in front of all of these commands. So you're going to see me put sudo, and then now we can just paste in docker volume create Portainer data. And then for the next command, again, we're going to put sudo, and then I'll paste it in. And this is going to, like I said, use the Docker CLI to create the Portainer container. It's going to download the image, and then it will deploy the container. So this is the container ID. And if I do docker ps, we can now see we have Portainer running, and it was created 7 seconds ago. So Johnny5 is now hosting Portainer as a website, and it's accessible via a URL now. So you should know the IP of wherever you installed this, but if you're not sure, you can do hostname-i. And now this 172, this is a Docker network. I'm interested in 192.168.69.100. That's the IP address internally for Johnny5, and that's what I'm going to be using to access Portainer. And then I'm going to be adding 9443 as the port. That is what it's hosted on as far as the port goes. So I'm logged into, like, I'm recording this video on Bender, which is running Ubuntu desktop, and I have Firefox installed. And what we're going to do now is open up Firefox on Bender. Let me jump back to here and back to here. So looking back at this, I'm on Bender, and I'm going to open up Firefox, and I'm going to navigate to the IP address of Johnny5 and the port of 9443. And because Johnny5 knows to forward that port to the Docker container, I'm going to be able to access the Portainer website. So it's as simple as doing https:// and then we do 192.168.69.100 and then port 9443. And as you can see, like, the browser has saved a bunch of previous URLs for Portainer. I've had it hosted on a lot of different internal IP addresses, but this is the current one that I'm using. And I get this, and you'll probably get this if you're in Chrome. They have a similar saying there's like a potential security risk, and that's because we're using HTTPS, but it's like the certificate is like hosted internally. So we just click advanced, and we're going to say that we just trust it, and it's self-signed, which means, when we set up this website, the certificate that it's using for HTTPS is self-signed. So we're just going to click advanced and then accept the risk and continue. And now we're in Portainer. And I just leave the username as admin, and I just let the browser create a securely or whatever, like a password, because it's hosted internally, and I'm going to change this password, don't worry, after this, although there's very little risk, but either way, you're going to put in your password. You can change this to whatever you want to be. And then you'll click create user. I uncheck allow collection of anonymous statistics. If you want to help out the project, you can do that. And then just click create user. I update the password because that way it'll know it automatically in the browser. And now you have Portainer installed. So again, this is accessing this website on a completely different computer, but it's accessible because it's being exposed through Docker. And now what we can do is actually start adding environments. So let's just click Get Started for now. Local. This is basically the environment. So you can see we're in the environments. Well, it's actually the home page, but it shows the environments. And this is local. So like I was saying before, this is just like my mini PC with 4 cores and 32 gigabytes of RAM. I don't like that it just says local. I want it to actually say that it's Johnny 5 because that's what it's called. So if we go down to environments, we can click on local. Then, well, that was weird. Uh, we can do Johnny 5 and then just click update environment. Now when we go to the home page, we can see, okay, it's Johnny 5. And if we click in here, let's do a quick overview of Portainer. There's a lot going on. So on our home page, all the environments, when we add our other PCs, will be listed here. And you can click into these environments and you can see there's stacks, containers, images, volumes, networks. So by default, Docker creates a couple of networks. So if we go in here, we can see there's these system networks that are created by Docker automatically. And when we did that hostname -i, that's why this gateway came up as a IP address associated with the computer because Docker has created these virtual networks. If we go back, let's just start at the top. So stack files, that's like Docker Compose. We're going to be creating stack files to run Autonomys. And we'll get into more of that later, but it's if you know about Docker, it's basically like Docker Compose where you're creating like these stack files and you're pasting in this YAML formatted file, and then you can just deploy these stacks, and you can deploy multiple images at once. So we'll go over that way more in depth. Containers, so we're actually running Portainer. That's how this website is hosted right now. So you can actually literally see the website that's being hosted uh, in your containers. Now you never want to, you can't even stop this. It doesn't even let you stop this container because if you stop it, then you can't access it anymore. We have one image, which is this is the Portainer image. So these containers are hosted on docker.io as images, and you download these images and install them. So, and the tags are kind of like the versions. So we've downloaded this image for Portainer with this specific tag of 2.21.0, and that's the version of Portainer that we're running. We have one volume. Remember when we created that Portainer data volume. So we have one volume that we've created, and we already talked about the networks. So you'll see for each of these, and I think you saw, but like when you're in a container, you can click this little icon here and you can view the logs, but you can also you can inspect it and see, information about the Docker container. This I believe has, yeah, like stats like CPU usage. It's not super great. We're going to go over a better way to monitor the CPU usage, but you can see it's using like basically 0%. It's very lightweight. Memory usage is only 20 megabytes. Like there's not a lot going on here. And then this should allow you to drop into a console because these are like almost full operating systems. It's using the Linux kernel for your host computer, but it's basically running like a small containerized version of like an operating system a lot of times. So this would allow you to drop into like a console, I believe, but I'm not going to even bother doing that because I literally never do it. And then attach console. I don't really use any of these. I only use the logs, and we're going to be using the logs a lot just to make sure that your autonomous containers are working correctly. Okay, so we have it set up on one computer. Now we need to install the Portainer agent to add additional environments. So let's go back to environments here. And instead of clicking on Johnny 5, we're going to click Add Environment. Then we're going to click Docker Standalone and then Start Wizard. Now, this is going to be adding an agent, and they give us a command here that we can run on our different computers. And this is going to not be installing the full Portainer server. This is just going to be the Portainer agent. So let's copy this command and let's go back into our terminal. So I don't want to do this on Johnny 5. Johnny 5 already has Portainer installed. I want to do this on my local terminal, so Bender and Terminator. So let's just control plus this a few times. And all I'm going to do is paste in that command and click enter. So I already have Docker installed. And now I'm going to be installing the Portainer agent. And you can see that it's installed it. And I already had it downloaded on this one, so it didn't have to download the image. And now we have this Portainer agent Docker container with this Docker container ID. So let's go back into our system here. And actually, sorry, we're going to go back. Now I need the current host name. So if I do hostname -I, again, we have the gateway for the Docker network, but we also have the internal IP address. I'm just going to copy that. And then we're going to go back into Portainer. And this was Bender. So I'm going to put Bender. And then we need to put in the IP address plus 9001 for the port because we deployed the Portainer agent on port 9001. So I'm going to paste this in and then 9001. As you can see, I've already done this for Bender. I just uninstalled it for this video, but all the steps are the same. We're going through the full number of steps. Now you can do more settings, but I don't add any tags or anything like that. So we can just hit connect. And you should see, this environment has been created and you should see the new environments listed over here. Now, we can go and just add a whole other environment right now. So let's do that. We're going to copy the command again and we're going to go back in here. And now I'm going to go to Terminator. And I haven't done it on this one yet, so it might look a little bit different, but we're going to paste in the command to install the Portainer agent. Oh, I forgot. I need to add sudo. Put in my password, and it's pulling the image. So unable to find image, that's totally fine. It just means it hasn't downloaded it yet. It's going to download the image, and now we have that container ID. So again, I needed to put sudo in front of it because I haven't added that group to my current user. Okay, let's jump back. Oh wait, first we need hostname -I. We're gonna grab 101 here. And then we're gonna go back and we're going to say this is Terminator. And we're gonna paste that IP address in here, 9001, and we'll click connect. And now we have Terminator. So we've added 2 new environments. And we will go to the home page. And we'll see now we see all 3 environments here. We've got Bender, we've got Terminator, we've got Johnny 5. Oh, that looks so good. I love this Threadripper PC. I just built this. If you're in the Autonomys Discord, I posted an image of Terminator. It's a cool PC. Obviously, there's many people with way better systems, but I've never had a system this nice before. Really enjoying it. And I can run literally 100 terabytes SSDs without any problems. So, anywho, I'll stop. I'll stop lusting over my new PC build, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to a fresh PC build. Although I did buy the Threadripper off eBay, I got a pretty good deal on it. I'm super excited about it. So it's a used Threadripper, but it's way too expensive to purchase like a brand new one. Okay, let's go back to the guide here. Let's just make sure I didn't forget anything. We're installing Portainer. We went through the overview. We've added more environments. So really that's it. So what we're going to do next in the next video is we're actually going to create our first stack file and deploy that. And I believe it's the node that we're going to be deploying first. And we'll get that synced up and good to go. So that's it for this video. I will see you in the next video, and hopefully this was helpful.